Here we are, folks, our second to last video. Today we will be discussing the immediate post-battle town of Gettysburg. We have touched on this a few times, but today I wanted to talk about the years following the battle. Thanks for watching and help our channel grow. Please like, share, and subscribe while you're here, and please subscribe as make sure we hit that little red button. So let's get into it. July 4th, 1863. It is not a day of celebration as it is in the North. It is raining hard in the town of Gettysburg. A long train of wagons are leaving Gettysburg, with thousands of wounded and dying men screaming. Union forces slowly move into the town. As civilians exit their homes, the town had become a sharpshooter jungle. Street barricades littered the roads, and in many of the churches and houses, hospitals were found. In some buildings, such as the Presbyterian Church on Baltimore Street, in the basement, many men have died due to the pileup of the dead being poisoned by the very air they were breathing. Across the northern part of the field, many of the farmhouses were filled with dead men. The Confederates, following their victory on the first day, instead of burying, just piled the dead on the stone floors in many of the farms to preserve them while the battling continued. On the southern part of the field was covered in many dead. Many of those left in the no man's land area between the armies had been wounded during the day, and at night they could have heard them being eaten alive by the wild pigs that pestered the countryside near Gettysburg. Meade was responsible with cleaning the battlefield as the victor, but in the days after the battle began to get pressured to pursue Lee. So quickly graves were made and the army moved on. The reality was they didn't bury everyone. It was left to the people of Gettysburg, who for 3 days were locked in their homes. Being led by Elizabeth Thorne, the wife of the Evergreen Cemetery caretaker, they began to clean up the battlefield. They began to collect many of the dead horses and pile them up near the intersection of the Taneytown and Emmitsburg roads. They would then burn the large pile of dead horses. In shifts, the citizens would walk the field, collecting rifles, bayonets, revolvers, swords, and unused artillery ordnance, and begin to pile them up at specific places across the town to keep them away from the young children of the town and make the town in any way possible a little safer. The next step, what to do with the dead. They could not be left in the large mass graves the Union Army had dumped them in. Many of them were so shallow that following the rainstorm, the bodies were now just in open view for everyone. So the town contacted the federal government and a decision was made. A man named Samuel Weaver directed the exhumation of the dead men and began to bury them near the Evergreen Cemetery between the Taneytown Road and the Baltimore Pike. At this time, people were only exhuming the dead Federals, opting to leave the dead Southerners in the mass graves. It was while doing this, a resident of the town, Dr. John F. Bourne, and his wife discovered a dead man. In his hand was a picture of 3 small children. They made a letter campaign to find the children to help identify the man. The man's name was Amos Humiston of Oswego, New York. Bourne would contact his wife, Philinda. Philinda, touched by the respect the Bournes gave, would move her entire family to the town of Gettysburg and become the first headmistress of the National Homestead at Gettysburg. It was an orphanage that the Bournes had built strictly for the children of men killed during the American Civil War. As the civilians began to run out of graves, they did, however, decide now was the time for the dedication. At this time, the people of Gettysburg christened the cemetery the Soldiers' National Cemetery. The committee for the dedication invited Edward Everett, a man who had been public service since the presidency of Andrew Jackson. He was the main speaker, and he would speak for almost 2 hours during the dedication. President Lincoln would also come and deliver the following address on November 19th, 1863.
4 score and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth in this continent a new nation,
conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether the nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. The cemetery will now become the Gettysburg National Cemetery. Something strange began to happen, though, in the town, which ignited local superstition. Across the field, thousands of dead Confederates still lied unburied. This wasn't actually ghosts, though. Personally, I do have a belief in the superstition. What this was, however, was the fluids of the human body mixing with sulfur and other such chemicals found in gunpowder and other things many of the soldiers had on them. It was giving off a green, eerie mist above where they were buried. So the civilians would see this, and it would help in creating the lore of the town, the ghosts of Gettysburg. The town would also become a tourist attraction in the coming years, the place where the undefeated Robert E. Lee was finally beaten. So like I said, this will be our second to last video on the battle and everything surrounding it. Our next video will be discussing Gettysburg today. I think we will stick to the American Civil War for our next series, which I will announce in our next episode. Thanks for watching again. Friends, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you real soon.